Hey everyone, and welcome. Welcome into another episode of the Tim and Jim Show. I'm Tim Sohn here in the woods hanging out with the bears, the turkeys, the occasional human being with Sohn social media solutions, and I'm super excited for today's show. But first I'm going to turn it over to my friend and trusty co-host, Mr. Jim Fuse. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Tim. It's great to see you. And I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia area, Marietta. And of course, Tim, I know you always want me to have a little bit of sports thing. So today I'm a little upset with
Right.
sports because Major League Baseball can't get their act together and have canceled the first 2 weeks of the regular season games, which is the end of March,
How dare
because
they?
they just can't figure out how to split up billions of dollars. Somehow they're all losing money and they're going to start losing fans. And, it'll be like when there was COVID and there were no fans in the stands. Well, there'll be no COVID and there'll still be no fans. So, because I think people have learned there's lots of other things we can do. Like when everything first happened, it's like, oh, I can go outside. I can spend time with my family and my loved ones, which really fits in well to some of the things we're going to talk about today with Nancy. And really excited to have Nancy here. We met through something that came out, good that came out of the pandemic, the Global Tea Break, which is run by our friends D. Scott Smith and Alan Hennessy. Uh, D. Scott's in Oregon, Alan's in Ireland. And I think and Nancy can correct me if I'm wrong, the third Friday of the month, they
Correct.
have a Zoom at 10 Eastern, and they just love, I've met people from all over the world. That's how Nancy and I connected, got to know each other a little better. And I was like, what she's talking about, I think, is important to our audience. I mean, not only are we going to be talking about, what to do in an emergency, but also thinking about how this affects you as a business owner. But Nancy also deals with another thing that we might get to, and that's elder care. And we were talking before the show. I'm starting to go through that myself, with my parents being in their 80s, and had that sibling talk last night. How do you get mom and dad to start making smart decisions so we're not all left with a horrendous mess? But Nancy, tell us about yourself. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I was like rocking out in the beginning with your openings.
Well, we like to get our guest ready that way, so that's how we usually do it.
Terrific. Well, my background actually is out of corporate governance and working with large public companies and their boards of directors, which I like to say actually prepared me for a lot of this whole care component business. Because if you can deal with those guys and gals, then you can deal with just about anything, quite frankly, because they put up some pretty tough walls for you to climb in many cases, and the challenges are real and big. So over the course of time, as the oldest child, as it usually happens with many cases, the oldest child becomes the one that the parents look to and say, so my dad would say he wanted me to take care of him in the manner in which he would like to become accustomed. So I was like, okay, Dad, I got it. I gotta work my butt off even more to make sure that you're living in the lap of luxury. But in reality, there were a lot that was going on, as many parents have. And so I unraveled a lot of messes for two parents who are extremely talented and ran their own successful manufacturing business. And as they say, politely, stuff happens. So that put me into the care industry, where I was just upset with what was going on and how people were being abused, not just the care of our parents, but the care of us, what's going on in the world. And I say how not to get screw glued and tattooed by the healthcare medical industry. And humor goes a long way to make us all go through it. But I've unraveled the secrets, the hidden secrets. I can't hear
We
you.
can't hear you, Jim.
I muted my microphone while I was coughing. Um, so good. What I was saying, we got a bunch of people chiming in on LinkedIn, and just want to let you all know, we see your comments on LinkedIn, but they're not coming into StreamYard for some reason today. So we will be shouting you out. We know you can also catch us on YouTube and Facebook. So if you really want your comments to be seen on screen, go over to YouTube, and then that way we can share them on YouTube, because we love people to subscribe to us on YouTube. But yeah, Nancy,
technology needs a little
Yeah.
care help too, huh?
That's right. So we're gonna talk about how to survive medical emergencies today, and this is a book that you've written. I guess it's not brand new, but it's on Amazon, and I'll make sure to drop the link on it,
Here.
because
I got
I
a
think
copy of it right here.
yeah,
So voila.
right. I think that's one of those things that we don't always think about, right? Because it's an emergency. It's kind of like accidents, right? We don't expect them to happen, but they happen out of the blue. I mean, I know, Tim, I don't know if this has happened to you, but I remember, gosh, this was probably 2006, and it was the 4th of July. I'm at the beach with friends, had a couple adult beverages, and I get a phone call from my brother. Dad just had a heart attack. It's like, and they're like 6 hours away. I'm like, what do you want me to do? Right? I mean, do I go? I mean, fortunately, my mom was there and was able to call 911 and get him transported. But he was lucky because one artery was completely clogged and the other was at like 99%.
Oh, he's very lucky. Yes.
And, so it's one of those things that, I don't ever think that we'd ever, as a family, talked about like, well, what's the plan? I mean, even, I don't know, my wife and I have talked about like, is there a code word even for like other types of emergencies, like when they're in trouble, that they would, text on the phone or things like that? And then of course, sometimes it's like, what was that word again?
OS doesn't count.
Right.
Family show, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Bleep.
But I know, I think I was fortunate, never really had that with my kids, but when they were growing up. But it's one of those things we don't think about, even like, do you have allergies, all those things. So Tim, I think we should get into the questions, because I think that Nancy's got a lot of great things to share with us. So do you want to start with question 1?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And I also just want to mention one of the comments. Russ Hedge is saying currently taking care of Mama, who is on hospice in a memory care. So just wanna send our
Love and
our
prayers
thoughts out to
and
him.
hospice is
for
they're
sure.
good people. Just know when to ask questions, which is all the time.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, let's bring on question number 1, Jim. So what are some of the keys to being prepared for a medical emergency?
So, the first thing and the easiest thing that anybody can do is to make sure that the emergency team responders can find you. And if you're at home, that's as simple as making sure the numbers on your house are legible and large enough for a passing vehicle to see them. And you'd be surprised how many people don't do that, including in like major cities. So you could be living in a condo, and you may have like little teeny tiny numbers at the front of your door lobby, and they're in silver. It looks aesthetically pleasing, but how the heck is a passing vehicle going to see that? Especially even at night when the lights are going and you can't find it, and you can't expect these departments to even know where you are. They're supposed to know the streets. Well, wait a second. Maybe there's a new person on. They may have known where the streets were and where the house was or the building was next to you, but they don't know you. So that's real critical. And if you don't have, if you live in a rural environment or you own your own home or an apartment, get the numbers, put them on your mailbox, but put them on the house so you can quickly find it. If you're in a city, call your call your building administrator, whoever it is, and say, look, these numbers are inadequate, and here's why. Simple as that.
Wow.
And
Yeah,
give them a time and a date to get it done by and follow up.
that's a great point, because I know sometimes when, even with these apps, right, whether it's Waze or Google Maps or Apple Maps, you still will get lost, right? or it's like, is this the right place? You know,
Turn
because
left and it happens to be on a railroad track. Oops.
yeah,
Not. We've heard those stories.
yeah, yeah. So I think that's, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. In fact, I have to think if people can see our address in the front of our house, other than on the mailbox, because our streets too, sometimes we don't have a lot of great street lights, but that's an excellent point.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim, have you thought about that? Can people find your house because you're with the bears and the turkeys in the woods?
We have no street lights. We have nothing. Yeah, I haven't thought
If
about
you
it.
have a
So that's
mailbox
great.
at the end, even if you don't, like put a stake at the end of your road. Because I mean, I get the rural environment. We lived in a rural environment. We're moving to another rural environment down here in Florida now, from Connecticut
Yeah.
to Florida. And you just put
Okay.
a 2x4 and put your numbers on it right at the end of the road so people can find it on both sides. So they're coming and going, they can find you.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, we have mailboxes, but it's like way down the road over the railroad
Yep.
tracks. And
Yep.
yeah, so we should definitely do something closer, I
And put
think.
like a little like red reflector on it so they can see it. That kind of thing. It's, it
Thank
doesn't
you.
like,
That's a great
you
idea.
don't worry
Yeah.
about aesthetics to start. And if you want to make it pretty later on, you can.
Yeah,
That's a
nobody around
great.
here is going to worry about pretty.
The turkeys might.
True.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
And so that's one great key. What are maybe some others, Nancy?
So the other one other real issue is get a file of life. Everybody, I don't care how old you are. You could be, the day you were born. Make sure your parents have a file of life. You have a file of life, and a file of life is simply a document that has all your medical history and information on it. Your age, your date of birth, obviously. Who to call in case of an emergency if you can't speak for yourself, even if you can. If you're the one that's in the hospital and they start asking your questions, you're kind of in pain typically, or you may be knocked out or a little delirious. And, if you're in and out of consciousness, you're not going to know what day it is. So guess what? You need somebody that they can call. You can get a file of life by going to howtosurvive911.com. It's free. It gives you all the instructions on how to do it. It's just a simple piece of paper with all the information. It's a fillable PDF, and just update it with your prescriptions, doctor's information, your address so that they know where you are and where you live and where you're from. Because let's say you have an accident in Virginia and you're from Florida. Well, that kind of helps because now you know your primary care doctors that are on there, who to call to figure things out. If you have allergic reactions, if you've had any kinds of previous surgeries or implants. So like your dad may have had a pacemaker. Well, that's going to preclude a lot of things that can be done. And you want to make sure that he's safe and they understand what's going on. Or if there was a stent put in at one point, or if now I'm going sort of from the aging perspective. But in my case, I had a car accident 30 years ago, and I had bolts and plates, and I was at a regular hardware store in my legs, both of them. So not that, they couldn't do certain things, but it helped to know that technically I had medical implants in my legs to keep them connected while they healed. So that's important. Even understanding whether you've got glasses and need to read. So somebody gives you a tablet to read a file of information, and you're like, well, I can't read this, but then you
Right.
pass out again. So that's the simplest form of information. You can download it, you can put it on your phone, but I always say do a paper backup, because I don't know if you're like me, but I'll take my phone. It's like, if I can even find the darn thing, and go through and say, oh, file of life is a PDF somewhere here.
Right.
30 minutes later, the EMTs find it, right?
Yeah.
Not a good thing. Not a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, looks like LinkedIn comments are finally coming in, so that's nice
Yeah.
to see.
Shout out to LinkedIn.
Resurrected.
I mean, they must have heard us talking, and so then they went and fixed it. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. Yeah, that it's
Yes.
interesting. And that of course, as Tim knows, I'm a big Apple fanboy, whatever the right
I have
term
one
is.
too.
I know, but I've taken it a step further because of their
Ooh.
commercials. I now
Oh.
have the Apple Series 7 watch,
Ooh, you're
and the
cool.
reason why is I was watching these commercials. Some of it was during the football playoffs where like the watch would call like 911. It's like, so and so is down, hasn't got up. This is his GPS location, and and it's going to keep transmitting it, even though the watch I have is not a cell phone watch. As long as my phone is nearby. There was another lady that was in a car accident, trapped
Yep.
in her car. She couldn't get to her phone, but she was able to use her watch to do that. And just the fact that you can set it to detect falls, but like, and maybe this is something we can talk about with emergencies.
And it's not an old person thing. It's not like help, I've fallen. You've got this like
Right.
contraption that looks like
Yeah.
like an orthopedic shoe around your neck, right?
Right. I know, because that's the whole thing too. Is like,
Hi, I'm old.
You don't look old. You don't look old, and I'm not exactly a spring chicken, but
No, but I'm just saying, it's like who wants one of those things
Yes.
on? I mean, they're not attractive, although they do have some that look like jewelry, but they're not. It's not Cartier, darling.
Right. So yeah, so if maybe Nancy, maybe there's some watches out there that look decent that people can wear to because I know also the other thing is like it'll detect your heart rate and kind of
Yep.
warn you if something's going on, that hey, you might be having a heart attack, and otherwise you would have never thought about it. And because I do have a family history of that, I figured, well, I need to go ahead and bite the bullet and do it. And I've figured out how to keep it charged all day. It doesn't take long to charge it a couple times a day.
Just remember to charge it, right?
Right. Yeah, because of course it does you no good if the charger's not working.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I think even with emergencies, I think one of the biggest things that happens for people is falls. Right. I mean,
falls happen a lot. Yeah, and and we panic and we don't think what to do, and it's scary. It's scary to be the one who's always in control, and now you're not. Right?
Yeah. I hate not being in control. That's probably a Marine thing.
Yeah.
But
That's
it is.
what had happened with my grandmother had a heart attack, and me and my mom had found her on the floor in her house. Like we had no idea, and we just went over, and she didn't answer the door, and we got in somehow, and that's ultimately she had ended up passing not that long after that.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Thanks.
But but knowing what to do. I mean, when you're in a situation like that, or if you
Yeah.
see somebody, it's critical to know who's in control and in charge. Just like
Right.
anything, a team of individuals needs a leader. And sometimes in an emergency situation or when something happens, there'll be too many leaders
Right.
that want to jump in. And so there's this sense of chaos and confusion that happens. And then all of a sudden, the person who needs the help is, I won't say forgotten, but they become second nature. The second person that needs to be put in the middle of the situation. And so in that case, if there's so many, let's say 5 or 6 people see something happen, and they all run over to get somebody up off the ground or whatever it is, make sure that you or somebody else takes control and you point like, Tim, Jim, go over and get a blanket so that we can prop her feet up. But somebody's in control, and everybody will naturally follow the leader. Believe me, if you know what to do and how to just organize the thoughts of everybody who's saying, oh my God, what do we do next? I mean, that adrenaline rush is going so fast for everybody to begin with.
Yeah.
So yeah, it happens.
Yeah, very, very true. Before we go to the next question, we're going to take a moment to play a short video from our friends over at StreamYard, and then we will be right back.
And we're back dancing on the Tim and Jim show, because why not dance? I mean, it's fun. And Yeah, we're here talking about medical emergencies on the Tim and Jim show today. And Jim, where do we go next with this conversation?
Yeah. So, Nancy, what are the conversations that we should have with our family about medical emergencies?
So the first thing would be to really ask, what do you want to do if this is like the big one, right? That is actually the most difficult conversation for a lot of families to have. And if you know what the people that you love and care about want to do, like if they can't revive you, do you want to be put on an intubator, or do you want to have a feeding tube, or do you want your body to be kept alive when your brain's not, right? Those are
Hmm.
the kind of tough questions to have. But those are the big, hairy, scary things. But the other is just what what makes you comfortable? How do we handle things? Who do you want me to call in case of an emergency? Do you want me to be in charge, or is Tim in charge?
Hmm.
How does that kind of work in cases of an emergency situation? But even with your siblings, if you're close by and they're, long distance, do you have a way to communicate and let them know something's happened? So I'll give you a prime example, talking about heart attacks, right? So one day I'm still living up in Connecticut, and my dad calls. And this is very typical of my dad. My dad didn't like to deal with real issues that dealt with life and death, but we always still talked about them, as difficult as they were. And I get a call from my dad. It's like 6 o'clock. I'm waiting for the train to go into the city from Westport, Connecticut, and I hear dad calling me on my cell phone, which he never did. Never
Hmm.
called the cell phone. Unless it was emergency. Nance, it's dad. Mom's had a heart attack. Everything's fine. Bye. And you're laughing. I'm laughing. So then I pick up the phone, knowing that he's not going to respond, because wherever he called from in the hospital is not a cell phone, because he refused to get one. I called my sister and I said, Cindy, did you get the hello? It's dad. Mom's had a heart attack. She's fine. Bye. And we both laughed. I mean, it was hysterical. She's in Oklahoma. I'm in Connecticut. And the next thing I did was call a family friend who I knew would be like on this, like white on rice, right? And sure enough, Jacqueline was there. She told me what was going on. Everything was under control. She would keep me abreast of what was happening next. And we knew who the doctors were, what was happening at the time, what kind of condition mom was in, and what the general situation was. And is dad cognizant of what's happening beyond calling us? But he always called me first, which was fine until, it was him.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think for me, I don't know, Tim, if you've had the same challenge. Like I usually find out like after the fact as well, like, oh, your mom had surgery. It's like, what? It's like you didn't
Yeah.
want to let us know before.
Right. She had a heart transplant, but she still got one. So everything's fine.
Yeah, yeah. Or even true story, right? As Tim would like to say, radiating real. So part of this conversation I had with my siblings last night, because I know my parents don't watch my show. Um, my dad's birthday was just a week and a half ago, and I called him, for his birthday, and he's like, "Yeah, I just got new glasses, and I went to get my I had to get my driver's license renewed, and he failed the eye test. But he said, but my eye
Ooh.
doctor is going to be able to give me a form so I can pass. But he said the doctor says I'm not going to be able to drive at night." I was like, okay, this is going to be a problem. So I'm like, well, Dad, have you ever heard of Uber or Lyft? And of course, knowing the fact that he's got a cell phone, but he doesn't even like to text, let alone I don't even think it's one that has apps. I'm like,
My
so
dad's
That's
the
that's when
my
same
I
dad.
way.
said, I said to my siblings, I said, we got to figure this out because, my dad will be stubborn and he'll be like, well, I can make it 3 miles down the road to the
It was
grocery
late
store.
when we started out.
Yes. Yes.
And we've had a few drinks, but we're okay.
Yeah. So now we're talking about whether we use, technology like, Instacart and get their groceries delivered to them and make them, be a little more planned. And of course, But yeah,
Just
so it's
tell mom
always
and dad, like, all the cool kids are doing this, right?
that's right. That's right. Well, they don't like that. My mom might like it, but that's a whole
Oh, and
nother
then
story.
spending $1, right? The other
Right.
thing is like, "Oh, how much did this cost you?"
Yes, yes, yes. That's part of
Lie.
the
Lie, 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 lie.
challenge with the move because there's a HOA and my dad's like, "Oh, the HOA costs $100 a month." It's like, come on.
Yeah.
It's like you need to get into a better place so you're not, hurting yourself. But yeah, because I think with these emergencies, we just never know. To your point, what do you do? I mean, my stepson is allergic to peanuts, and he's
Yep.
had a couple times where he was at a restaurant and starts to go into that, anaphylactic shock where things starting to tighten up, and even he's a little stubborn because it's like, do you have an EpiPen with you, right? And it's like, but those are the things that we have to
Practice
know about.
using it. They have those practice pens, just take it
Yeah.
out once a month and just to make sure muscle memory goes a long way.
Right, right. So I think, talking to family. Now, Nancy, do you think there's a specific, like, you talked about the life document, but is there something that maybe we should also have in regards to, I mean, I know I guess they call them living wills, but is there something we should also do in regards to what we want done, like, because maybe we're knocked out and it's like, I want to be taken, if I'm home, I want to be taken to this hospital. Like, I don't want to go to this hospital.
Yeah, so that's a tough one. If in any emergency situation, they're going to take you to the closest
Hmm.
point of aid.
Right.
At that time, once they've sort of patched you up or do what they have to do, and you're aware of what's going on, then you can decide whether you want to be transported to another location. But just like, for example, you're in Virginia, I happen to be visiting, and where they're going to say they're not going to take me to the hospital down here in Florida. Not going to happen, right?
Hmm.
And you just sometimes, I hate to say this, sometimes you hope for the best in the situation that you're in. But
Right.
understanding, as long as everybody understands what your wishes are and what to do, the job of the medical team is always to, like, do no harm and make sure that you come out on the right side of things. Or as my husband likes to say, this side of the grass, as opposed to the other side.
Right.
But so, I mean, ideally, that's a situation. But yes, you should have a will or a trust. We can put things in which will help with probate. Understand that if you cannot speak for yourself, that you should have medical power of attorney given to somebody else that you trust who can make those decisions for you if in fact you can't, and it's sort of like the end of the line for you. But they also need to know what your wishes are too.
Hmm.
And that's critical to have those conversations. And they may change. Like today, I may say, you know, do all you can, extreme measures to make sure that life continues till I'm like 200 years old, right?
Right.
But later on, I may think differently. I mean, who knows?
Hmm. Yeah. Because, one thing is, as we see medicine and technology advance, you think, oh, well, if this had happened, 5 years from now, things would be different, so, but you're right. I think ultimately it's the quality of life. I know that's the conversation that me and my wife Karen have is, I don't think you want to be a vegetable, just to be
That's right.
alive. That's definitely a tough
Yeah,
one.
my mom had a brain aneurysm, a massive
Mm.
brain bleed the day after Thanksgiving, and so when they talked to me on the phone in the emergency room, and my lead aide was with her, and devastated because she was so attached to my mom, which I love and I was thankful for. But the ER department said, "We don't expect her to live an hour. What do you want to do?" They were ready to transport her to the next hospital to do brain surgery on a 91-year-old woman. I'm
Wow.
like, absolutely not. I knew what my mom's wishes were. And when I got down there that night, or down here in Florida that night, the doctor, the emergency room doctor said, "What do you want to do?" And because I knew what my mom's wishes always were. These were conversations you have over a lifetime with your kids and your family and whatnot. And she said, if I ever become a vegetable, just shoot me. So using my brilliant sense of humor, tell the doctor, well, mom said shoot her. And he panicked, like, we can't do that. Now there was not a born American. There was something kind of lost in translation probably there to say, no. Figuratively, we're going to take her home. We'll deal with hospice. And that's what we did. But he was kind of like, what family am I dealing with here? It's like,
Yeah.
I laughed myself afterwards. I'm sure if my mom were there, she probably was, well, she was, but she was probably laughing that we couldn't hear her.
Yeah.
Or say, please get it over with.
Right.
She's listening.
Right. She's listening. Well, yeah, that's right. That's kind of a scary thought that you can hear what people are saying, but you have no way to respond to that.
Well, they say the hearing is the last thing to go. So,
except in my mom's case right now, it's the first thing.
well, you would be surprised. You would be really surprised how even when they're like deaf as a doorknob or doornail or whatever the saying is, that people will pick up on little things and they know subtleties, and you may think they can't hear you and don't that they can't.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And
They're
I
probably just
think,
ignoring you.
and I think Chris Stone brought up a great point too, right? These are tough conversations to have, but you have to have them because even, I'm sure all of us, I'm in my mid 50s, I think Tim's in his mid 30s.
40s.
It's like we have,
I should have let it go.
I have classmates, right, from school that have passed away in the last 5-10 years suddenly. So this whole thing like, oh, I can wait to do something about it is not necessarily the case. And so I think this is.
And we've all
is
had friends who have passed away in college or younger. I
Mhm.
had a sister who passed away when she was 3.5 years old from childhood leukemia.
Mhm.
So, having these conversations, and these were the conversations we had in our family right from the beginning. Being the oldest child, I've got a blog post somewhere that says, my mom and dad prepared me for their death since I was 5. And by learning how to dial 911 on the phone, and my
Mhm.
mom laying out and pretending that she was, comatose or dead or something, and my aunt, her sister, pretending to be the doctor at the door, ringing the doorbell. How would I answer the door? How would she prepare me to have that muscle memory? But there were all conversations like, what would happen if something happened to my parents? My mom always and dad always told me what was going on, who would take care of us, never to be afraid. So we had those conversations. They weren't obsessive,
Mhm.
but they were part of the years and how things changed and what went on. And I think actually if you have them in small doses, it's not sit down, and have a drink with your folks and say, okay, now let's get real. It's the little bits and pieces. It's like they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Mhm.
And you can have those conversations that are actually joyful and fun and lighthearted at the same time of being serious and
Mhm.
getting to the point.
Right. Yeah. Oh yeah, because things do happen. I mean, yeah, definitely you got to. I mean, we're never prepared for it, right? We
Yeah.
can prepare as much as possible, but when it happens, at least if we have some
Yeah, on
preparation,
Friday at 5 o'clock, I think I'm gonna have a heart attack. Could you be here for
right?
me at that time?
Right. Very true. So Tim,
Yes.
you want to go with our next question?
Sure. So Nancy, well, first I want to thank Alan for his comment. It is a long time since Tim was in his 30s, LOL. So thank you for that. And I should thank myself for bringing
Just a year
that
or two,
up.
right?
So yeah, thanks, Alan. So Nancy, how do we protect our small business from the impact of medical emergencies? That's really the
Really
question.
important question. So
Yeah.
Keyman Insurance helps a lot, right? Making sure that you've got, directors and officers, insurance liabilities. So in case something happens, you know what to do. But just like a family, a business is a family matter no matter what, even if it's a large business or a small business. What happens if you, the founder, like we say, like X's and O's, kind of go out, right? And is not around anymore? Who's taking over, even in the interim? What happens next? Are you going to dissolve the business? Are you going to keep it going? Do you sell it? Is there another family member you train for it? Especially, we're talking family businesses.
Mhm.
But if it's not a family business, who else is in charge? Do they understand where all the keys and the passwords are for the bank account? Do you have a second signer? Is the attorney there involved to know what to do next? Is your accountant involved in the situation, the conversation? So this is really what I call scenario planning for business.
Mm.
It's the what ifs. And just like you would do for family, it's scenario planning. It's just business-wise, it sounds a little slicker to say scenario planning, but it's the what ifs. And if you always know the answer to no, then you know what to do to say yes.
Well, and that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that because I have a business bank account, and so does my wife. But I would tell you that neither one of us, if something happened, has the ability to access the account because you think like, oh, well, that's your business. It's probably something we at least need to consider.
Tomorrow, today, go down to the bank and make sure you are each co-signers on your bank account.
Yeah.
They don't need to know what's going on in the bank account, just to know that they have signing privileges.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Great point.
Somebody you trust.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So if you're
That's the
having,
same for me as well.
oh, you haven't done that either?
No,
Yeah. You wouldn't
that's
think
really
about that.
interesting.
Or if you've got a child that's old enough to say, hey, listen, you have signing privileges, but this is in case of emergency. In the meantime, you don't get the card.
Right. Right. Yeah. No, I hadn't even thought about that till you brought that up. So hopefully that's, and there's two of us that didn't think about that. So hopefully
Yeah.
if you're listening live or on replay and
Let
you
us
haven't
know.
done that,
And then what would happen to customers? Or what would you tell them, right?
right.
Think about it. If you've got an emergency situation and you're the sole proprietor and there's nobody else there, how would you allow other people involved to communicate to the customers that you're not available?
Mm-hmm.
Do you keep it quiet? Do you continue on with the project? Are there project people that you have backup in each situation? So those are real, because that's where the money's coming from, the customer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And without that,
I
you don't
just
have a
had,
business.
that's a great point. I just had a friend here locally, Atlanta. Pete Kane is his name. He's a great guy. And Pete, I don't know if you're listening or not. Pete had a massive stroke a few weeks ago and he's recovering, but he runs his own business and his kids posted about it. That's how people kind of found out, he's slowly getting back, his abilities, but, he has this business. I don't know how that's being handled at this point. I mean, he actually did come on Facebook the other day and did a live, obviously still trying to get his speech back, but just right, that whole thing of, you know, my wife wouldn't know what to do if something happened. Like, who do I call? I mean, I'd tell her to call Chris Stone and Tim, um, but aside from that, I don't think she would really know what to do. So that's,
But, it's really scary to even mention it to customers because some customers will say, "Well, screw that, I'm out of here.
mhm,
I need my project done, and, I don't care if you croak or not." But in reality, that's a real concern, and it may here's a suggestion. If you're in a group of people that have small businesses in your community, maybe now's the time to have a conversation with them about that too and say, "What would you do? How could we have each other's back? Or do we?" And even conversations to have with customers that rely on you. If this happened, "Jim, I know you're relying on me. This is what I've got set up. Would you stick by me?"
mhm,
Because you may need those customers to continue to pay your medical bills
right.
or, you know, or not. But those are real questions that an honest conversation and relationship with the customer base is critical to have.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
ones I don't hear happening at all, quite frankly.
Yeah. I mean, I think for some of us right now, right, this is the first time we've kind of had this conversation, and that's why I thought this would be a great, great to have you on because you've seen it, right? You were
Mhm.
in the corporate world, and you've also seen how, things like parents can affect the ability for someone to run a business because maybe you have to become the caretaker. And those are the sort of things that we don't always think about. I mean, that's kind of like right now, even though I'm the oldest of four,
Mhm.
my sister lives 45 minutes from my parents. So in some aspects, right, tag, she's it. But me and my brothers need to be able to help support her if it gets to that point. And even just having that conversation about, how, because my sister has a really good job with Capital One, and sure, she's
Yeah.
working remotely right now, but on the flip side, you know, she's got, kids that are still in, high school, middle school age, and, we can't expect her to do it all. I mean, just even I think you probably know, Nancy, the impact of being a caregiver.
It's hard. It's extremely hard, especially when you've got a job or a business, and we all have that now, right? So, and I'm glad you're having these conversations and discussing it with your sister, and especially when you've got siblings who are both genders, male and
Mhm.
female. I think that the tendency is to expect the girl or the female to be the one who's the nurturer, and that puts so much burden on us. It really does, because typically we may, I'm saying for, speaking as, for other women in many cases, we may be the ones who feel like we can handle it all. But,
Mhm.
we're tough as nails, and we don't typically show how the impact is happening on us and to our family members and to others until we snap. And that can destroy, sibling relationships, and that's not good. So I'm glad that you're having those conversations and say, how can the three of you manage together, and
Mhm.
that those relationships will ebb and flow over time too.
Right.
Just because she's physically there doesn't mean that she has to be the one that's dealing with the doctors all the time in those conversations.
Right. Yeah. Very true. Very true. And at least like in my case, because I do run my own business and I'm able to do things, because of technology just
Mhm.
about anywhere. If I needed to, right, I could say, you know what, I'm going to run up there for a few days, take care of some things so you don't have to. And I think that's something that you have to, but I'd also have to think about, can I support my customers while
Mhm.
doing some of these other things? So I think
So
that's
I'll give
the
you another story if I may. A couple of years ago, Jonathan Lithgow, the actor,
yeah.
was doing a one-man show out in Broadway. It was pre-COVID, and I desperately wanted to see it because it was called Stories by Heart, and he talked about how he cared for his dad in his final time, because he was the actor, and all his siblings says, "Well, you're between gigs." Which I had to laugh, because between gigs is great, but you're still out, like, chasing your food,
Hmm.
right? And we get that as entrepreneurs, like, we're constantly on the hunt, spears and all, in a
Right.
good way. We're not stabbing our clients in the back, but we have to sort of corral and chase them down, and that takes time.
Right. Right. Tim, what are some of your thoughts on how you could see this impacting your business? Because, Tim, as I know, and you've shared before, I mean, you do sometimes have some challenges, whether it's your migraines or the fact that your,
And you're a
cancer
survivor
is
too,
around.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a 15-year leukemia survivor. Found out in December I'm
Congratulations.
cancer free. Um, so I mean, I do have health challenges. I still get the migraines. So there's a lot of things to think about, just health wise, and um, but this conversation has brought up a lot of things in terms of, I do think a lot in terms of like legacy, and
Mhm.
especially now, like, I being cancer free has brought up a lot of things for me that I thought I would think of while I was in the thick of cancer, but it's been the reverse situation.
Hmm.
Um, but uh,
While you're going through it, imagine you're just trying to struggle through and survive. You're dealing day to day,
yeah,
right? And then
exactly.
after, you
Yeah,
have it's like, "Oh my god, I can't bel did I do that?"
right. Yeah. Yeah, but I just appreciate this conversation. It's brought up a lot of things in terms of what I should be thinking about in terms of my business, and yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just goes back to, right, because I'm a, I still think I'm a newlywed, even though it's been, going on 4 years. But, my
Congratulations.
wife and I talk about that. It's like, what would happen? Where are all the passwords? And so now that we're actually sitting down with a planner, a financial planner, that's making us, have access to see like, okay, here's where the money's going and things like that,
Mhm.
you know, that when you're young, you should start doing that stuff. But
Where do you want everything to go
right,
when you're gone?
right.
Who are your beneficiaries? Does that change later on? And that can change later on.
Hmm.
And that's okay. Just because you're putting things down now doesn't mean it's, set in stone and put up on the mountain.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are all things I need to work on. Like there's so many things like that and so many more.
Just one step at a time. Just do one little thing, have the conversation with
Yeah.
your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got young kids, right, Tim?
Yeah, 10 and 7. 2
Yeah, so
girls.
just talk to them and say, like, "Would you know what to do in case, you know, mommy stopped breathing?" Not
Hmm.
that it's gonna happen. You don't wanna be scaring
No.
scaring them,
Yeah.
but let's do a fire drill. What happens if a
Mm,
fire breaks out? Little
yeah.
things like that. It doesn't have to be health related. It can
Right.
be a fire drill. Our community growing up, they used to do community fire drills. I don't see that here anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's very true. I
Or
mean,
take
or
them down to the firehouse. What does a fire truck look like? Talk to the EMTs. It's a really cool day trip and an afternoon trip for kids.
right.
Even adults. I mean, I went to the firehouse, post-COVID before we moved. I was like, "Oh my god, this is just, like, amazing." And they let me get up into the fire truck, which I'd never been in before. It's like, "I can actually sit up here?" I was like, "Oh my goodness." I was a 5-year-old again.
So
That would
I've
probably be
shared
really cool. Yeah.
yeah, I've shared the link to Nancy's book in the chat on all the different tubes. So if you want to get that book, but
Yeah.
um, I want to share this. We're going to share this, but because this kind of goes over to what else you've been doing, Nancy, and that is you have the Eldercare Success Podcast.
I do. That's
Tell us
my
about
2nd
that,
podcast, yeah.
and because I think that's it. Because sometimes it's kinda like I could see where emergencies tie into elder care because maybe if you had done some time planning with the elder care, you wouldn't be in an emergency. That makes sense?
No,
Kind of
not
point?
necessarily because, emergencies, things are gonna crop up no matter
Right,
what, right? A fall's
right.
gonna happen, a heart attack's gonna happen, a cut when somebody's on Coumadin and you don't know how to stop the bleeding, little things like that, and just monitoring health conditions and not knowing what
Mhm.
stuff creeps up on you really slowly, and all
Right,
of a sudden, boom, there it is.
right.
And it's being aware of the little subtle changes, not just for us, but for our folks as well.
Yes. Yes. So tell us a little bit more though about what you're doing in the elder care, arena.
So, well, I'll start with the podcast. The podcast is Doing It Best with Elder Care Success. And if you go to the billboards, picture of me and my dad. I took my dad up on a helicopter ride. He was 98 years old. So we're always looking for adventures that I could take him on that would be somewhat safe. But if we dropped out of the sky, well, I was going with him. So we're fine. I didn't have to worry about it. And the podcast is really just focused on, positive things to do and think about. There are so many great shows there on elder care, but, I kinda listen to them and think it's like listening to NPR and everything's quiet. You don't talk too loud. If you ever listen to there's, I joke and I say it's the, Alec Baldwin sweaty balls skit. It's like, "Hello."
Uh,
So, I talk about they look like loud and bold and like, "I'm mad as hell and not taking anymore. What can we do differently?" So we think about different things. I've got, one show we talked about, uh, hypnotherapy in the OR, which means that you can actually do hypnotherapy, not totally, 100%, but you can reduce the amount of anesthesia, especially in an older person or anybody, to say, can we reduce the amount of toxin going in our system, still not know what's going on, and come out better on the other side? So, that's one example. I'm going to be doing a show with a professor, an MIT professor, talking about animals as sentinels, like how do
mm,
animals detect disease, and even AI stuff that's going on where you don't need the animal, but there's a way to detect disease or changes in breaths or just odors of people so that you know what's going on. So really pushing the envelope on that and having some fun with it. We just did a show that the last one was with Susan Silver, who was a comedy writer in Hollywood and wrote a book called Hot Pants in Hollywood. So Hot Pants in Hollywood and Eldercare. Listen up. It's kind of fun. How do you use humor to keep yourself going forward in a positive thing when, the world is dark and gray and stormy?
Right.
NPR like. But so that's that. We've got the it's an Eldercare Success Facebook group, which is a private Facebook group only for those of us that are taking care of older parents and really need some guidance and help. It's not a bitching session. It's just a way to think positive about solving problems and knowing that you're in control of the situation. You can say yes, you can say no. And once you understand that you're sort of the boss of the day or the moment, then a lot goes away. It makes things a lot easier. And then I'm building a course, which will be on helping people, among other things, building a course on how to understand contracts, care facility contracts, because there's a lot that people get into and don't understand that all of a sudden you can go from, let's say, $2,500 a month to, we went to $30,000 a month when I took mom and dad out and said, you can't afford this, and thankfully my dad did not have dementia. We could have honest discussions about finances and say, what do you want to do, Dad? And we made those decisions together as much as we could. And those are good things to do. It's always an open line of communication, and think that communication is one of the most important tools we can use, and not to be afraid of hurting people or offending them. It's, having the empathy or sensitivity to be honest and direct in a way that's not cruel, right?
Right. Yes, very true. Yeah, this has been amazing, Nancy. And so just doing a little bit of stuff here. So the podcast is one way for people to connect with you. What's another way, Nancy?
They can reach me out on Facebook or LinkedIn. And we're building up the website, which will be released soon, but that's going to be caremanity.com. In the moment, it's to arrive soon. And then you can go to howtosurvive911.com, where you can get a free file of life. That's all free. That's yours, and some information on how to get the book, which has been thoroughly researched with medical professionals, EMTs, trainers, doctors, lawyers. So we've got that involved too. And there's a lot of tips and tricks in there that are really simple and easy to follow, but they are critical to both your physical health, your mental health, and your financial health.
Yeah. And I'm excited, Nancy. We're going to get to meet in person in May. We're both going to VidFest/Podfest in sunny Orlando. And so if you go to vidfest.com, I think /Amazon, use the code Amazon, you get 20% off your ticket, is one way to do it. And so Nancy will be speaking. Chris Stone and I are going to be speaking and running a full day on Amazon on May the 27th.
Congratulations, Jim.
Thank
and
you.
Chris.
And I think on Friday evening or afternoon, something like that. Yeah.
Yes. And
congratulations to you, Nancy. That's awesome.
Yeah. And Tim, you had something you wanted to share with us. So why don't you go ahead?
Yes. Next week we have a special edition of the Tim and Jim Show next week.
Yes.
I will be interviewing Jim about his perspectives on cancer. The next week's edition of the Tim and Jim Show is part of this 24-hour virtual event called Open Your Hearts and Wallets for Blood Cancers. It's a 24-hour live streamed fundraiser for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Many of you all know that I'm a 15-year leukemia survivor, and started sharing my story in June of 2021. And so this organization has helped out me and my family so much in terms of providing financial help for medication. They have amazing support groups that my family have partaken of, and they have education. They hold webinars and do important research, clinical trials, and so much more. And so next week, I'll be having a conversation with Jim about his perspectives on cancer. Jim is going to ask me some questions, and we're going to have Rob House back, and he'll be doing some freestyling. So we'll be having some fun as well. And so we encourage you all to show up. The entire event kicks off at 6 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, March 8th. on my LinkedIn profile, among other places. We'll be kicking it off with Rachel Druckenmiller will be performing. Pamela Formica from LLS will be there. Among my entire team from LLS will be there, or not from LLS, but all the volunteers that have been helping me. And we'll be having a lot of fun, and there'll be musicians performing throughout the in-24 hours. There'll be live conversations with cancer survivors over the 24 hours. And it's really just to raise awareness. Our goal is to raise $50,000 over the 24 hours. So just thank you to everyone who is supporting the event in some way. So we look forward to seeing you either here during the Tim and Jim show or at some point over the 24 hours. I'm just so grateful for all of you who are showing
It's
up.
amazing work.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
guys.
agree.
My sister, who I mentioned, died at 3.5 of childhood leukemia, which is now pretty much curable. So, the whole research has gone a long way. Adult leukemia is a little bit more difficult, but congratulations on your survival and success too, Tim.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you so much for sharing that, sending you lots of love and prayers about your sister.
Yep, I have many friends who've gone through that with their children over the years, and they've survived. So that's good.
Yeah. But
What were you
thank
gonna
you,
say,
Nancy, for joining us. Tim, you're continuing to do great work. At least educating and letting people know that they're not alone when it comes to their journey with cancer, and that and I know that there's hopes that we'll have more cures over these next few years. I know sometimes we wonder why there's not more focus on that, but hopefully we'll see more of that.
One day at a time, as they say, right?
That's right. So we'll see you all next week. Thank you again, Nancy, for joining us.
Guys.
Thanks.
And make sure you check Nancy's podcast out. Chris Stone says she's got great audio.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. I'll try my NPR voice next time.